All right, let's get started. So hi everyone, my name is Snigdha, and welcome to our speaker series. Today is the second half of our STEM speaker series, and this panel features students studying computer science and mechanical engineering. And just a reminder that this session is being recorded. So firstly, we have Matthew here, who is studying computer science. So Matthew, would you like to introduce yourself and exactly what fields you're studying?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Matthew, and I'm studying computer science at UFC, specifically in the concentration of game development.
Awesome. So what made you choose game development as your degree?
I've always been interested in STEM, and like how the world works, and just math and science in general. Uh, but I also wasn't a huge fan of following the rules and like doing everything by the book. I wanted a way to express my creativity and express my ideas, and computer science was the perfect fit for that.
Oh, okay. And would you say that computer science or game design is a competitive field to get into?
Uh, Computer science, yes. There's surprisingly not really a lot of people interested in game development, but computer science, yes, is quite competitive. Um, Very regularly, you'll see like on forums and stuff, just people asking about the computer science field, and it's a very sought after career path, like all over the world. So.
So since it's so competitive, how did you find the entire application process and that sort of stuff?
So computer science wasn't actually my first pick coming into university. I wanted to go into kinesiology, um, but as everyone knows, UFC is pretty competitive in kinesiology, and I didn't end up getting in. And it took me a while to like fully discover computer science. And when I did, it took me a little, like I'd say, a year to get my GPA to a place that was competitive to transfer in. Um, but once I was in, I found the workload to be quite nice, and like it's competitive, but I think it's worth it.
Okay. And you said that you worked on increasing your GPA. So do you have any tips on how you could do that?
Um, what I did is I chose to take a lot of electives early, so less demanding courses that would be easier to increase GPA. Obviously, the backside, like the it's kind of a double-edged sword because what ends up happening is later in the year you're kind of overloaded with a ton of heavier workload courses. But if you're looking to raise your GPA or looking to transfer, you have a few options. You could either upgrade or what I did is I just chose to take my electives early on to really raise my GPA.
Okay. And like, what are some examples of like easy electives to get high marks in?
Um, for me, a lot of mine were like sociology, drama. I tried to get into a few English courses, but yeah, mainly sociology and drama.
Okay. So how do you think that university is different from high school?
Um, so I can't speak for everyone, but for me personally, the main differences between high school and university is that in university you can study anything you want. You're not really forced to take what everyone else is taking. And I think that's actually a huge advantage in university because personally, when I was in high school, I struggled with a few classes because I just wasn't interested in the content, right? And so focusing in those classes and just putting aside time to study for these classes is really hard for me because I just wasn't interested. Um, so yeah, that's the main difference I find in high school and university, just being able to study what you truly are interested in.
Okay. And is there anything that you could do to like ease the transition between university and high school?
Um, I think one thing that would help is just early on trying a little bit of everything, finding what you really enjoy doing. Because once you enjoy a topic, studying it doesn't really feel like studying. It's more just like doing something you enjoy, right? So obviously doing something that you're not interested in would probably be a lot more grueling and unpleasant. But especially early on, try a little bit of everything, because doing something that you're passionate about makes it a lot easier.
Okay. And then, would you say that university has like given you more opportunity to do things that you enjoy as opposed to high school?
Um, I'm not so sure I'd say it's given me more opportunities, but it's definitely uh, opened up my eyes to more opportunities, like things that I wouldn't have realized that I'd be interested in uh, through the perspective of a high school student. Um, there's just a lot more resources in university that allow you to really broaden your horizons uh, as opposed to high school.
Okay. And what were some of those resources for you?
Um, for me, it's a lot of career fairs. You can also find a lot of posters around the university just advertising different events that are going on. In the STEM field, especially, there's numerous students around the campus looking to start projects and stuff, and just collaborating with other students as well. The networking opportunities is quite great in comparison to in high school.
Okay. And what does a common daily workload look like for you in university?
Um, a daily a daily workload would be like I go to classes. Uh, in COVID, it's not really so much like that. Usually, it's like 3 days a week I'd go to classes, and then in my free time, that's when I do my studying and really doing all my homework and stuff. But I also like to go to the gym and spend time with friends. So balancing that out is a little bit of a challenge, especially in the STEM fields. Uh, but it definitely is manageable.
Okay. And how would you say would be like a good way to make sure you balance everything out, like balancing mental health, physical health, and schoolwork?
I'd say just sticking to a schedule. Uh, in high school, you have a schedule that you have to follow. So it's not really something that a lot of people think about in high school. But in university, you're not obligated to show up to class, and no one's telling you to do your homework. You just have to do it. Uh, so I think setting your own schedule for yourself is a really big thing that puts you ahead of a lot of other people when it comes to managing your life in university.
Okay, so it's more like self-discipline almost.
Right, right.
Okay. Would you say that like there are any tools that people who are going into computer science should invest in early on in their career?
Um, I think a big one, Visual Studio Code. It's a text editor. It's super versatile, supports a bunch of different languages, and allows for a ton of customization. Um, it's something that you will use probably for the rest of your life if you want to pursue computer science, and I just highly recommend it. I didn't get into it super early on, and that's one thing that I wish I did get into early on, and I would recommend to everyone.
All right.
Nick,
And what?
you have a call. You have a question in the chat for Matthew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you, Daniela.
The question from the chat is there any gaming company that you're interested in applying to after university?
Yes. I think all the big ones like, Nintendo, Blizzard, all of like PlayStation, Xbox, all of those are super appealing, but also um, not necessarily any specific one. Like I really just want to make games. I don't really care where, although obviously working at the super giant, like big companies would be amazing.
All right. And then the next question we have is what parts of the journey from like your entire university journey do you find frustrating?
Frustrating. I think the main thing I find frustrating about university is like what I was saying earlier, just trying to balance school life with your own personal life. And it's something that I continuously try to get better at every day. But I'd say, yeah, that's the main frustrating thing.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what parts are really exciting about your day or your journey in university in general?
The things that I find the most exciting are the opportunity to be able to learn new things every day. I think STEM is a field where it's constantly changing, constantly evolving, and just knowing that today I will know things that I'll know tomorrow, and then also tomorrow I'll learn things that I didn't know today. Just continuously learning, I think that's the most exciting thing about being in STEM.
That's a very unique perspective. I've never thought about it that way before. We have another question from the chat. Do you have any advice about applying to scholarships?
About applying to scholarships, I'd say just apply to everything and keep looking out for everything. No one really tells you like, oh, there's this scholarship. You kind of have to go at it and look for it yourself. So just be persistent, I'd say.
Okay. And then what are some resources that we could use to find scholarships?
I know that the university provides some, but also you could just go into Google and look up for your location or for the university that you're applying to, their name plus scholarships, and a bunch of stuff will come up. So that's what I did.
Oh, okay. Another question from the chat is, have you had the opportunity to work on a gaming project while you're in university?
Yeah, so I've actually fully finished 2 games now. I did like a really janky, like buggy one in first year, and in my third year, I had the opportunity to make a fully 3D racing game, which is really fun.
Oh, okay. And are those like published games that are open to the public?
The first one, I believe, is completely private, but the racing game that I made is on the internet. It's for free. Like you could just go and download it. But yeah, it's on the internet. You can find my GitHub link.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'm gonna check that out after. And sorry, another question in the chat is, what's your game called?
The racing game we called Circuitron. The reason because it's a circuit style racing game, but we also took heavy inspiration from the movie Tron. So it's pretty much you're racing in these bikes that leave light trails, but it's kind of Mario Kart circuit style. So you go in a loop, and first one to complete the amount of laps wins.
Oh, that sounds fun. It's kind of like Mario Kart then, I guess.
Right.
Okay. Are there any misconceptions about the field of computer science?
I think a big one in computer science is that coding is like this big, scary concept that takes a long time to learn. And I really don't think it is. Coding is like, it's a tool, like how a writer uses a pencil to write stories. A programmer uses coding to solve their problems. You could do it without programming. It's just programming happens to be the most efficient way to do it.
Okay, so it's almost like a secret weapon.
Right, right.
All right. And then what was the best advice you've learned that helped you on your university journey?
I think the best advice that I learned in my university journey is, as cheesy as it sounds, not to be afraid of failure. Especially in STEM, failure is a super necessary part of the process. You need to fail in order to learn and move forward. So yeah, I think just not being afraid of failure is the biggest thing.
All right. And then what's one piece of advice that you'd like to give to our viewers here?
I guess be persistent and passionate about what you want to do. I think a lot of people overvalue grades, but I think if you are truly passionate about what you're studying, grades shouldn't really matter. Like, value the learning more. The grades will come once you've got the learning down.
Oh, okay. Another question from the chat we have is, how many schools did you apply to?
I applied to 5 or 6 schools, all Canadian schools. I wasn't really interested in moving too far, but yeah.
All right. And would you say it's okay if you only apply to like 1 or 2 schools?
I mean, if you're confident that you're getting in, yeah, but I'd say just play it safe, apply to a lot.
Okay, like just as backup plans and stuff?
Right. It's always good to have contingencies.
Okay. And about like when you were applying, what was the most difficult part of the application process?
I'd say the most difficult part of the application process was just staying on top of everything. Not every school requires the same things. Some will have slightly more to the application process than others. So make sure to put aside time to do these applications. It's not really something you want to do on a whim.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Another question we have from the chat is, what housing or utilities or food products did you think would be more expensive?
So I actually live in Calgary with my family. So I just live with my family. However, food, I spend a lot of money on food. Definitely more than I thought I would, especially living at home. So.
Oh, okay. And then another question we have is, do you need a creative mindset to do well with the gaming development?
It definitely helps, especially if you want to create games from scratch. But for game development, especially, it's more about solving problems and getting the foundation really built up. In game development, you can create a game engine and then use that game engine for multiple different games that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. So the creative mindset definitely helps with creating narratives, but building the actual software, not so much super creative, although you can go about it multiple ways to solve any problem.
All right. And then you mentioned earlier that like you didn't really like rules per se, but like computer science sounds like it would have a lot of rules when you're coding and stuff. So is that an aspect of computer science that you enjoy?
Yes, surprisingly, it's kind of strange. Coding definitely does have rules to follow. However, you can use these rules in multiple different ways. Like for example, if you want to go about, sorry, I'm struggling to come up with an analogy here.
No worries, take your time.
Let's take a car, for example. Obviously, there's rules to the road, right? However, you can change these rules. For example, if you're a NASCAR driver, you can drive like a NASCAR driver. Not on the road. Obviously, you want to be driving in these regulated areas. However, you can, like it's possible to do. So, for example, I code according to the book. However, the things that I code, for example, you can code security, you can code crypto, and I chose to do game development. Like that's the kind of creative freedom I mean.
Oh, okay. So like there's more than one outlet, basically.
Exactly. There's multiple things you can do with programming.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Another question we have from the chat is, what subjects did you focus on in high school, and how did they help get you into game development?
In high school, I think physics and math, those are the really big ones. I think computer science as a whole is very math based. It's more like a math degree with coding. And so definitely physics and math helped me a lot getting into computer science.
Okay. And then what was your favorite subject when you were in high school?
Physics. I just liked knowing how the world works and uh, plugging things in and seeing how your inputs affected your outputs. And I think that applies heavily to computer science.
All right. And then did your courses or did your view on courses change as you got into university?
Um, I wouldn't say my view on courses really changed a whole lot. Just the way that I took courses, I guess. Um, like I was saying earlier, you have the freedom to choose what courses you take in university, right? So I was no longer limited to taking courses that I wasn't necessarily interested in. And I guess in that way, yes, my view on courses did change.
Okay. And then what are some of the courses that you are currently taking?
Currently, right now, I'm only in 3 courses. I'm taking human-computer interactions. That's a course where it's pretty much the study of user interface design. I'm also taking networks, which is the study of like the internet and setting up servers, clients, that kind of thing. And then I'm also taking a security course, which is about security.
Okay. And then what made you choose all these courses? Or like what in particular caught your interest for each one?
Human computer interactions has a huge presence in game development. In games, you want your game to look appealing and easy to use. It's really about the quality of life factors and how easy you can make it to navigate the interfaces for the user. And so that was the reason behind that course. Security is also a big thing in game development. You don't want people hacking your games or breaking them. And then networks as well is super relevant in gaming, especially online gaming.
All right. And then another question we have from the chat is how much free time do you typically get in university?
I think you get enough time. I don't want to put a hard number on it because I don't want to disappoint anyone. But you definitely get enough time to have your own life outside of university. Yeah.
And then how important would you say it is to have like a life outside of university and like studying and stuff?
Definitely important. You need people around you. Having a regular or like having people around you makes university, I don't want to say easier, but you miss out on a big part of the university experience if you don't interact with the people around you, especially people who share similar interests and goals.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And another question from the chat is, what courses did you get access to in university that you never knew existed until you did them?
A lot of like just in the field of computer science, programming. I had never programmed before university, and that opened my eyes to a whole new world. So.
And then did you wish you would have started programming earlier on?
Yes, I definitely do wish that I had started earlier on, but I don't regret not starting earlier on. You'll see like from time to time, there's people who started programming when they were like 13 and they're like wizards, but part of it, like you're learning, right? University is about learning. So I don't regret not learning it, but I do wish I had started earlier.
Okay. And then another question from our chat is, are you a part of any extracurriculars or clubs outside of university?
Currently, I'm just part of the game development club. We have meetings almost every week, and we just show off the projects that we're doing. We also participate in game jams. But yeah, that's the only club I'm in.
Okay. And then what exactly are game jams?
So game jams are some of them are competitions, but mainly it's a bunch of programmers that come together. You get split into teams, and you have a set amount of time to create a game, and then you show it off at the end.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. And then did you take any extracurriculars in high school?
Not really. I swam in high school, but other than that, I didn't really do that many extracurricular activities, mainly just sports in school.
Okay. And then would you say like the sports teams and stuff helped like build onto your high school experience?
Yeah, I think being in sports definitely helped me transitioning to a world where you kind of have to do things for yourself. Just having that discipline there definitely helped in university.
Okay, that's fair. Another question from our chat is, assuming you'd be a part of a team when creating a game, do you focus more on coming up with ideas or more on creating the game itself?
So when creating a game, typically you want to start with the foundation, just building up the engine that allows you to be creative with it. And once you have that engine completed, then you can really start coming up with ideas, because you have the freedom of creating these entities and things that are more on a higher level that aren't necessarily just programming.
Okay. And then like when you play other video games, do you like try to take notes and like about what things you wish you would incorporate from those video games into your own?
Well, I don't physically take notes, but I definitely do note in my mind, like, oh, this feature is really cool, or this is really fun. And especially when I'm playing like multiple games, I'll imagine like, oh, what if this game had features from this other game? Like, for example, in my game Circuitron, it was Mario Kart mixed with Tron, right?
Oh, okay. So like you're creating basically like fusions of some of your favorite games, mixing them together.
Right. Yeah. So I just look for the features that I like, features that I don't like, and try and my best to make something better.
Okay. And then another question from our chat is, were there any games that influenced you to go into game development?
I wouldn't say there are any specific games, but just games in general. I really enjoyed playing video games, and I was like, I want to put this kind of stuff out into the world.
And then what are some of your favorite video games that you play?
Recently, I've been playing League of Legends. I just played Hades. I really like the Dark Souls games. Just action adventure in general. That's kind of my genre.
Okay, that's pretty cool. All right, so it looks like we've covered all the questions that I had, and the chat questions are also finished. So thank you so much for joining us today. And there's, sorry, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. So if there's any other questions from the chat, feel free to put them in right now. Otherwise, thank you for joining us, and I'll hand it over to Daniela.
All right, thank you for having me.
Okay, so now we're in our second half of the interview. Just for anyone that's just joining us now, this interview is being recorded. So I'm just welcoming our speaker who is studying mechanical engineering. So I'm going to let him introduce himself and what he specifically does and what his field is all about.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. My name is AP, and I'm currently in my third year of mechanical engineering in the internship track at the University of Calgary.
Okay, awesome. So what made you choose mechanical engineering?
So in high school, I was really interested in vehicles and aircraft and boat carriers in general, things that move, and buildings as well. And then the design aspect of those buildings, vehicles, cars, was really interesting to me. So in high school, I really focused on getting into engineering. And then once I was in engineering, in first year, you have to achieve a certain GPA threshold to get your first choice of your specialization. So that's what really pushed me towards mechanical engineering.
Okay. So would you say like getting into engineering was really competitive?
So the competitive nature of engineering is pretty consistent throughout each university, where you have to apply with 5 courses that are pre-selected for you. It's dependent on how academically inclined you are in those 5 courses when you're getting in. So those courses include physics, chemistry, math 30, calculus, and ELA. And you tend to only be able to apply with those courses. So for me, I enjoyed physics and chemistry, while math 30 was not very enjoyable for me. Calculus was pretty good. So I didn't have too much difficulty getting into engineering, but I do think that if you do struggle in those subjects, you're going to have to put in a bit more effort, but it's not really impossible to get into engineering at any university, really.
Okay. I feel you with the math 30. It's like a little struggle for me right now.
Yeah.
Well, what made you like decide going to U of A? Like what made you feel more connected to that school?
So I go to U of C, but
I'm sorry, U of C, my bad.
so I lived I'm born and raised in Calgary, and at the time of first year, I was actually 17 years old, so I didn't feel comfortable moving out, moving away. Um, and also with my research that I did on the universities, in general, engineering is highly regulated throughout North America. And unless it's a really specific program you want at a specific university, there's no real reason to choose a university further from home.
Okay. So mechanical engineering is known to be like really quite difficult to get into. So what do you think, what is some advice to give to the people listening to help your application to stand out from others?
So once again, when you apply in your first year at University of Alberta and University of Calgary, University of British Columbia is a bit different. And I applied to all three. U of A and U of C only request your grades. They don't actually request a written section. And from as far as I know, both U of A and U of C, you don't actually choose your specialization. Your first year engineering is Common Core, where everyone is in first year studying the exact same thing. And whatever GPA you achieve in first year gives you the ability to choose your specialization in your second year. I would add for University of British Columbia, the initial application process has a pretty in-depth written section. And with that written section, I would definitely highlight your extracurriculars and show that all round you're a genuinely good person, and it's less focused on academics, the written section. It's more focused on the type of person you are. And I will add, at University of British Columbia, I don't know if they still do, but they tend to add, I think, 2 to 3% to your final average if you apply from the Alberta curriculum.
Okay. How did you find the application like process between, you said you did U of A and U of C and UBC?
So U of A and U of C were definitely the easiest, even if you compare that to the Ontario schools. I didn't complete one of the Ontario applications because they're very in depth. UBC is significantly more difficult just because of that written section. It requires a lot more hours and a lot more work when you apply.
Mm-hmm. Uh, how different would you say university life from lifestyle is from high school?
So in high school, a lot of times, I think as I'm just reading what he said, where you're you're not really told to do anything in university compared to high school. You might feel a bit of imposter syndrome as well, depending on how academically inclined you are, because you're going into an environment where everyone is smart, or if not smarter than you. So sometimes you do feel down about that. And beyond that, like I would say another aspect of university versus high school would be the long days. You're at university for a long time, you're walking a lot, and it gets very, very tiring very quick.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips that you could give to us for the transition from high school to university, to ease the transition for us?
Yeah, so the best way to be at the top of your game in university, I would say once again, is to be healthy, by eating healthy and taking care of your body. And once again, reiterating what Matthew said, don't be too hard on yourself. I know it was cliche, but for real, just don't be too hard on yourself if you don't do well in an exam or a test. The goal is to achieve and do well, but it's not to make your health, negative. Don't put your health as a second to doing well.
Mm-hmm. How would you say the workload is as a mechanical engineer?
So workload varies a lot from engineering to engineering. In general, in first year, it is very high. For mechanical in particular, it gets very, very high in third year, and it dies off in fourth year. And electrical, I think second year is really hard for them. In the first half of third year, it varies. But for mechanical in particular, I'm sorry, for first year in particular, I was spending from, I think my first lecture was at 9 a.m. and I was at school till 3 p.m., 4 p.m. most days. And every single day, dependent on if it was midterm season or final season, I would expect to study around 6 to 10 hours daily, 10 being on the higher side. And with university, you have a lot of flexibility with what classes you go to. So a lot of times I wouldn't go to my early classes because they're in the morning and I was studying deep into the night.
Mm-hmm.
With yeah, that with the workload, I think to help with that, develop your studying skills prior to university. Um, make sure to have things. Make sure to understand what works best for you and what doesn't work for you. And that's a learning process. And throughout university, you can develop that as well.
Mm-hmm. So how many hours would you say you would spend in class?
In class, yeah. So from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., you're not always in class. So I would like 4 hours, 3 hours, 4 to 3 hours in class. The rest is just like empty time in between. Lectures can be first year lectures in particular, they can be very long because they're massive class sizes. So you might have a lecture that's 1 hour and 50 minutes long, which is I think the longest they can give you. But you also might have 50-minute lectures every three times a week. Or you might have an hour and 15-minute lecture twice a week. So it depends on the day. But on average, 3 to 4 hours is not unheard of in engineering.
Okay, so it really does vary throughout the days and what you're taking.
Yeah, and then lab sections, they can be 3 hour long lab sections, and then tutorials can be 1 hour long as well. And everything just adds up slowly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're saying, so your daily workload is looking like 6 to 10 hours outside of school, you'd say?
It depends on what time of the year it is. But if I had to give a number, which I mean, I personally don't want to, but if I had to, I would give 6 to 10 hours. Sometimes you do a bit less, sometimes you do a bit more. But in general, I think 6 to 10 hours is a pretty solid estimate if you want to do well.
Okay. And what made you want to pursue mechanical engineering?
As I said earlier, my interest in mechanical systems, in particular vehicles, boats, and aircraft, it was really, I looked and buildings as well. I looked into civil engineering, electrical engineering as well. But I found that with mechanical, you're able to do so much. The variety of work available for mechanical engineers is immense. And with that, I really wanted to go into mechanical engineering.
Okay. So this was like a decision that you knew out throughout high school that you always wanted to go into some type of engineering.
Yeah, I would say I knew before high school, mainly due to my interest, and I was really into sciences such as like chemistry and physics, and I didn't want to go into medicine at all. So that's why I chose engineering.
Mm-hmm. What are some tools that you have to give to people that want to go into engineering or mechanical engineering in specific?
Tools, I think studying habits and learning techniques, you should develop those. That's something that everyone can do in high school. Understand what works best for you and how you can critically think. And one thing I would recommend on top of that would be time yourself when you do questions, time yourself when you try to learn concepts, understand exactly what works best and what's the most time effective. since, you know, if you're studying 6 to 10 hours, you know, I know people who could do that in 4 hours and do better than me because their studying techniques are more efficient. So you want to find the most efficient way to study. That should be your the tool that you should be developing for mechanical engineering and in any engineering.
Okay. And then what part of your journey into going into mechanical engineering did you find more frustrating?
So the sheer amount of workload is immense. You know, you're doing a lot, you have a lot of courses, typically more than what a regular undergraduate degree has. And engineering is very rigid. You don't actually get to pick any of your courses except for 2 of them. So that is something that you should, it's a fair warning to a lot of people. You get to pick 4 4-3 electives, but they're all engineering electives. And you get to pick 2 non-engineering electives throughout your whole degree. So I think it's like you pick 2 courses out of the 32 courses you take. So you don't actually end up enjoying all of your courses. And, you know, when you're studying something this in depth, enjoying it is kind of, you know, kind of need to enjoy it. But when you do find a course that you enjoy, since engineering is very in depth, you get a lot of self-satisfaction from the learning process. I think that's the key takeaway from, you know, it might be frustrating when you're learning it because once again, 32 courses, you might not even enjoy like 5% of those courses or 10% of those courses. But, you know, if you do find one that you enjoy, it can get you through the whole semester.
Yeah. So that's like and then for going throughout your journey to find what's exciting, you'd say is like finding out of those 32 courses, finding the things that you really enjoy or the courses you really enjoy more.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think as Matthew said, finding a balance is very frustrating because, you know, it is very difficult to find a good balance between work, school, and your outside life. But yeah, hard work does pay off though. So.
And then, are there any misconceptions about mechanical engineering?
Yeah, so with mechanical engineering, I do hear there's a lot that it's a dying field, that you can only go to oil and gas and mechanical engineering. That is that's not true at all. A lot of times with mechanical engineers, you're working on multiple systems, such as, you know, if you're, let's say you take a mechatronics minor, or you don't even need a mechatronics minor, you're working on a lot of robotic items or automation or automation processes. Furthermore, you can be a design engineer. Beyond that, you can also go into certain fields of integrated programming. So I don't think it's a dying field at all. If anything, you know, year on year, it's going to be increasing. And especially with the shift towards software, a lot of my mechanical engineering courses have control systems involved in them. And those things, you know, you really need a physical engineering degree to concentrate on because it's not very coding related. It's more signals related, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And one of the questions that we have in the chat is uni worth all the money and pain to become a mechanical engineer?
That's a very good question. You know, you ask yourself that a lot during engineering. I think if you want to go into a field where you need an engineering degree, I think it is. You know, you can't go into becoming a facilities engineer without having that mechanical engineering background. But if you if you aren't too passionate about mechanical engineering or electrical engineering or civil engineering, I think it's probably not worthwhile at all because you're spending a lot of money and you're suffering a lot just for a degree you don't really care about. So is mechanical engineering or any engineering worth the high price tag? Yes, if you want to go into those fields. No, if you don't want to go into those fields.
Okay, so it's really about what you're really passionate about. And then with your application process, how many schools did you apply to?
University of Calgary, University of Alberta, University of British Columbia, and I'm forgetting 1 or 2 others.
Okay. And then what were your favorite subjects in high school? You said physics and math. Were there any electives that you found really interesting, or was it just those 2?
Well, I enjoyed physics the most and chemistry second. Calculus would be a middle of the pack there. For options, I only took sports performance, so I didn't really have any other options that I took. Gym was cool, but I didn't really have any electives or anything else.
Another question that we have in the chat is, do you have a dorm and what is it like?
No, I don't have a dorm. I live with my parents. That was a very big factor. Living on campus, I'm a part of a lot of teams. And so with that, if you do live on campus, it gives you a slight edge because you're able to work for longer hours for the team, and in general, you're closer to the university, so you can get to meet a lot more people in those teams.
Mm-hmm. Even though that you don't live on the dorm, have you heard of any horror stories, any bad things about dorming or anything like that?
At the University of Calgary, some dorms are better than others. I can't recall which ones. If you go on Reddit, you can probably find which ones are better than others. Horror stories, no. I've ate at the Landing before, that's where all the residents are. It's good food. It's a buffet. They have a lot of variety. They have kosher food. They have halal food. They also have vegan, vegetarian, a lot of options for everyone. And it's not bad. So I'm gonna assume living on res isn't awful, from my limited knowledge.
Yeah. Another question we have is, do you have any wild stories from uni?
In engineering, you don't really get a lot of wild stories besides academic ones where you're, I think typically pulling all-nighters is not as wild as it seems once you're in university. Besides that, from solar car, taking our vehicle and just doing donuts in the parking lot at night, stuff like that is probably the wildest it gets in engineering, unfortunately.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have in the chat, but I do have one more. And finally, what is your best advice that you can give us that you've learned going through like this whole university process?
Biggest thing first would be develop your studying habits and studying techniques, learning techniques, everything like that. Second would be join clubs. Being a part of teams has taught me more than I've learned in class. Being a part of technical teams as an engineer significantly boosts your resume and significantly increases your internship chances. There are companies out there that will not take you unless you're in a club, which sounds, and not just a normal club. You have to join the engineering clubs, such as I'm a part of Solar Car and CubeSat, Schulich Racing. You've probably heard of them. Zeus, teams like those where there's the interview process and they have big funding and they compete at the national level and international level for Solar Car and Schulich Racing. That's what makes you stand out when everyone else is doing an engineering degree. You're going into engineering with 1,000 classmates, and then in mechanical, let's say you choose mechanical or electrical or software, you have about 200 to 250 classmates now. To stand out in a market where I did say engineering is not dying, but that doesn't mean there's a lot of jobs in let's say electrical or mechanical. There are a lot of jobs, but there's not a lot of jobs you'd actually like to do. Not everyone wants to sit there and look at spreadsheets all day. And if you do, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want more technical jobs, if you actually want to design stuff and be a part of cool teams like Garmin, they exclusively, not I want to say exclusively, but there's a heavy bias on students who join teams. And in your interviews, when you do your interviews for your third year, they come up all the time. Research as well. Research is also, if you can get a research position at a good engineering lab, that will make you stand out. And in particular with my research, I was able to get internships, interview the internship opportunities that other students weren't able to even apply for because they didn't have the relevant background experience. So that's what I would say would definitely be the biggest thing you should take part in during university.
And you said you were a part of this team called Zeus. What is that?
So I'm actually part of Solar Car and CubeSat. So Solar Car is we build and race a solar car. It's made out of carbon fiber, 100% carbon fiber. We design everything from the suspension to the steering to the telecommunications things on the vehicle. The solar panels are on the back of the vehicle. You can search it up. It's on. We have a website and everything. Our car, I think right now, costs around $600,000 to $700,000. We're building our next car. We get a lot of funding, so we're able to do stuff like that. Then we go down to the state, then we race them. Most recently in 2018, at the World Solar Car Championship, whatever it's called, we got first place. So we beat universities such as Waterloo and Berkeley. Okay. So it is worthwhile being a part of a team that's competing at that level. You get a lot of notoriety. And then I'm also part of a team called CubeSat, where we're developing a satellite to send to space. It's very aerospace focused, and it's a new team, but it's led by master's students, which is an interesting approach because it lets us get access to things that we don't really have as an undergraduate team.
Okay. So I have a couple more questions in the chat. One question is asking, do you recommend buying a car while in uni?
Okay, this is a very good question, actually. I had the same question first year. It depends on where you live. If you live on res, absolutely no. The Brentwood station is right there, and the university station is right there. A lot of things that I participate, are in downtown, and a lot of times in Calgary, it's very commuter focused. So they always say get a car, but if you live on res, you can just take the train, go to downtown. It's a lot better than having a vehicle because parking is very difficult. But if you do live, like, I would say, if you don't live close to any bus or train station like I do, I would get a vehicle. Having a car gives you a lot of access to what Calgary really has to offer. I don't know if everyone knows that, Calgary is really close to the Rockies. We also have a lot of winter activities which you cannot get to without a vehicle. So having a vehicle and just being able to go to the Rockies for, a couple hours on a Saturday, whenever you want, in an hour you're in Bath, an hour 30 you're in Bath, like an hour, 2 hours you're at Lake Louise. Like it's awesome. So getting a car is nice, but if you're on a budget and you live on res, I don't think it's necessary. It will make your life more enjoyable in Calgary though, but it's not a necessary need.
Okay. And as you were talking, I think I picked up that you're in third year. So a question is asking, how was uni online?
So second year was mainly online. With engineering, the professors uh, they aren't, they know that students will cheat. So the exams are built to be cheat proof. I will say that, I don't condone it. And I think it's, when you're in a degree like engineering where you're liable for a lot of people and you're, having a degree with a professional designation, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be participating in academic misconduct. So I've been a big fan of how, in engineering, the exams that are developed are very anti. Basically, I will say this right now. If you're going with the understanding of, online school being easy because it's engineering, unfortunately for a lot of people that wasn't the case. It's actually more difficult because the professors incorporate exam types, like very difficult exam types, to ensure that cheating is not possible. So in online school, I would say the stress level was about the same, but the workload was slightly increased from in person. In person is not as hard as online, in my opinion.
Okay. So it was not as easy as people might have thought. And then
Yeah.
another question that we have is, what research are you doing right now?
So I did research in my second year summer over the past summer. I was doing research in hydrogen energy, where we were developing a test facility to mix natural gas and hydrogen and then test stratification within the pipe system. This was funded by a local company, pretty big natural gas company. And it was really rewarding because when you have more budget, you get to do a lot more cooler stuff. So being a part of a project that getting money provided from a company. And also, if you do go into mechanical engineering, the Pipeline Engineering Center, I know pipeline's scary, but they have crazy funding. So if you get research in that field, or even in biomedical engineering, it's heavy mechanical there. Biomedical engineering, pipeline engineering, our micro edging technology stuff, all that stuff, like, they have very good funding. So my research might have been hydrogen focused, but you can get research in health related engineering fields as well, which are also very well funded.
Okay, that's great. And would you say research is different from high school and university, and what makes it different?
Yeah, research is really different when it comes to what you learn and how you're learning it, especially engineering research. You don't actually apply it. You don't. How do I word this? And for example, in my case, I was having to use equipment from 10, 15 years ago only because it was the only equipment that we could find because of the pandemic. A lot of supply chain issues with that. But engineering helped me develop the skills needed to use that equipment. And it wasn't like I was able to use it right away. I had to read a manual for the equipment. In engineering, you're going to find a lot of times you're going to be reading a lot of manuals, a lot of equipment manuals. So it was like a 400-page manual, and you can't exactly skip anything in it because when you're working with hydrogen gas, there's a lot of room for error, and error can actually cause death when you're working with dangerous fluids. So with research, you're able to understand exactly how industry would go about this problem. They would get an engineer to read up on the manual, and from there they would develop a problem statement, and then from there they would develop a solution. And that requires iterations. That requires long days, long nights as well. But that's the difference with research. In industry, you won't be expected to work after 5 p.m., but in research, you will be expected to work after 5 p.m. They don't say it, but in general, you're kind of expected to work a lot more hours, and you don't get paid for it.
Okay, so that's something to watch out for. Another question that we have is that are professors as mean as people say?
Depends. Most professors aren't professors; they're actually instructors, and if it's an instructor, they'll tend to be nicer. But in my experience, I've had a pleasant experience with most of my professors. People will call them mean if they mark very hard, which is true. I mean, the prof that I did research with was my professor in my heat transfer course, and our class average was like 16%. So a lot of people thought he was really mean about that. But that being said, there are professors who genuinely care about their students. Not as many as I would like to say there are, but they're not mean, I would say. They're just trying to, if they're a professor, they're there to teach, but they're also doing research. They're very busy. So they might come off as rude or mean, but if they're an instructor, most of the time they're not doing any research. So they'll be more inclined to help you after hours. And I think, in general, professors aren't that mean. But if you do get on the bad side of a professor, you're not going to have an enjoyable semester.
Okay. And then another question I have is that what are your plans after you graduate?
So my plans, I mean, it's pretty far away, but in general, my plans are to go into either CE, which is consumer electronics, or FE, which is facilities engineering. In consumer electronics would be more, consumer electronics design engineering, and then facilities would be more, I would say, like your energy engineering, oil, natural gas, hydrogen, solar, one of those two fields. And from there, there's a lot of opportunities beyond that.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for you today. There's no more in the chat, and I finished all the ones I have on my paper. Well, thank you for everything, AD. You gave us a better understanding of engineering and everything.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Go ahead, Arian. If you have a few more questions, please ask them. Matthew, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So I guess if Arian, you wanted to throw them in the chat, go ahead. I see Farida's hand is up. If you wanted to speak, Farida, you go for it.
Arian can go before me.
Okay, yeah, throw them in the chat. So from Arian to Matthew, for future gaming projects, do you plan on adding meaning to your games, whether it be about human rights, politics, environment, etc., or do you plan on focusing to make something that's more fun in nature?
I think mainly focusing on something that's more fun. I kind of view games as an escape from the real world, so I try not to bring real world things into it. I just want to make a project that people can play and kind of forget about everything else that's going on.
All right, and what changed your mind into gaming development after kinesiology?
The main thing was just that with game development, I'd have the creative freedom to make what I want to make, right? You can't really freestyle in a hospital or as a like a massage therapist or something, right? Like you have to follow the rules or people get hurt. Game development, I have the freedom to create what I want to make.
That's really cool. And that's true. So interesting. You get to be a little bit more creative. I like that.
Yeah.
A little less pressure, perhaps.
Exactly.
And that's totally fair. And I bet you just watching these nurses and doctors during this pandemic probably was like, yep, totally the right choice.
100%.
Do you believe that there is enough credit that goes into game development?
That's an interesting question. I actually don't think there's enough credit. I'm not sure how much you guys know about like what goes on in industry for game development, but when a game is about to release, that's when the developers are really in crunch time, and you see a lot of unpaid overtime. And from what I hear, it's not pleasant to work in a big game development company coming up on releases. And I think a lot of gamers don't really realize how much time is put into a game, especially like they definitely don't think about what is going on when developing the game, because like that's not what people see, right? They play the game and what they see is what is on the screen. They don't really see the hours that was put behind into creating these ideas or solving these unique problems.
Absolutely. I mean, in theory, it sounds like a really cool thing to study, but I agree, like with all the work you have to do to get it, people probably have no idea. They're like, oh, I'm going to
Exactly.
create some video games. Cool. That sounds easy and fun. And I'm sure in a lot of ways it's super fun, but also quite challenging.
Definitely.
Farida, did you want to ask your questions?
Yeah, so I have a few. Sorry, just give me a second.
Go
So
for
a
it.
friend of mine is thinking of going into game developing as well, and graphics in specific. And the question, so they weren't able to attend, but they texted me a few questions that they have for you. And so one of them was, what do you think about breaking into the gaming industry and women in the industry in general, even just in terms of your classmates?
So yeah, I think women are definitely underrepresented in the like computer science field. It is a very heavily male saturated industry, but that's not to say that that they can't break into the industry. Really, I think a lot of people view computer science as like, oh, it's like these nerdy people just coding. But it's not. It's math, and you do it with coding. And like this notion of like, oh, it's just a bunch of like sweaty nerds. Like, throw that out the window. Like, anyone can come into computer science. Anyone can code. Anyone can do math. That's really all it is.
So I also had a few questions on my time, and I'll let them know, by the way, of your answer. So thank you for that. But I wanted to know. Give me a second. Sorry, I wrote them down,
It's all
but
good.
I have to like scroll all the way up through like this chat to find them. Oh, I wanted to know if you knew about crunch culture within the gaming industry.
Yeah. So that's what I was referring to earlier. Like coming up on big releases, that's like really where crunch time happens, and it's not exclusively limited to the gaming industry. I'm sure AD can relate. Whenever you have to deliver on almost like anything, the weeks leading up to like delivery date, those can be some of the most stressful times if you haven't properly prepared, or if you haven't taken the pacing necessary in order to deliver the product exactly how you want it to be. Crunch culture is definitely, I think, more prevalent in gaming. It's just not a lot of people really realize it, but I'm sure if you go up on Reddit and just look into crunch culture in gaming, you'll find tons of horror stories about it. I think if you guys are familiar with the game Cyberpunk, that's probably the most notorious story of crunch culture there is.
Okay, so another question I had was, what do you think the future of the gaming industry will look like with the way gaming and streaming culture is blowing up the way it is right now?
I think it's going to become something that is going to be normalized across all generations. I think, especially with the metaverse and everything, a lot more of our world is going to be related to gaming. Not necessarily just gaming, but just this meta universe where game development will be present in all of these facilities.
That sounds super awesome, and thank you so much for answering all my questions. But
Yeah, of
that's
course.
it for me then.
You too. Thank you.
We also have a question here from Caspi. It says, in an industry that's constantly changing, how do you keep up with the changes to engineering codes and regulations? How does this affect the learning process? And I feel like both AD and Matthew, please feel free to answer from your perspective.
Well, I don't really deal with engineering codes as I make video games, but about in the context of coding, keeping up with the most recent updates and stuff, it's really a lot of it is independent, and you just have to go out of your way to find these kind of things. But maybe AD can give more perspective on the engineering side of things.
Yeah, so with engineering codes, they change not frequently, but every 4 to 5 years, like the ASME B31 or the LNV like 570, and they're pretty long code books. And so what we tend to do is that we just go through the books, and they always highlight the changes from the previous book. And you just go through, you read the code changes, the regulation changes, and if you're working on a project currently, you tend to implement those changes. But if it's a previous project and they have requirements to update the project, they will always have methods to update and bring it up to regulation. So the learning process, how does it affect the learning process? It is a learning process in and of itself where you have to learn how to read regulations and code books, but it's not that difficult. Most times you have one engineer doing it and he just forwards the information. So it's not something to be scared about.
Thank you so much for that. I'm just seeing. Perfect. If there's any other questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat right now, or you can put up your hand and you can ask your question live. I'll give another minute for that. And if there's nothing else, then we'll start to close out for this afternoon. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything else. So I just wanted to, on behalf of the Mayor's Advisory Council on Youth, I just wanted to say thank you to Matthew, AD, and Christian for coming to speak to us today and making sure that we had our questions answered and giving us a lot of really great information. As a reminder, this whole session has been recorded, and it will be posted up on the MACOY website. I will put that website right up on the in the chat right now, and it probably won't be up there till after Christmas, I want to say, but it will be there along with the other speaker series we have coming up in the wintertime. So thank you again so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time, Matthew, AD, and Christian, and have a great